هي تؤمن بقيمة الكلمة وبقدرة الكلمة على التغيير حتى لو نطقت بها الآلة. من لبنان إلى هارفارد ثم إلى وادي سيليكون، حيث أنشأت مختبر أبحاث هو الأول من نوعه في العالم. إنها مي حبيب، إحدى رواد الذكاء الاصطناعي ومؤسسة شركة رايتر التي تقدر قيمتها حالياً ب$2 مليار والمدرجة ضمن قائمة فوربس AI 50. سنتحدث من هنا من جراج في الرياض عن العمل في زمن الذكاء الاصطناعي، وعن التحيز واللغة والهوية، وعن الرحلة الشخصية لامرأة تصنع طريقها في عالم تقوده الخوارزميات. أهلاً بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من حديث مع الصبا. May, I'd like you to explain Writer to me as you would to a 7-year-old.
Well, it's funny, Siba. I have a 6-year-old, so this is not, this is something I do have to actually do. So I think of Writer most simply as a technology that helps take complicated processes inside of big companies that were designed for humans to do them, and we redesign it so that AI can do them.
The other interesting question that I wanted to ask you was the name Palmyra. Mm-hmm. You've named it Palmyra. Is that a nod to the ancient Syrian city, of course?
Yes, of course. And I have been there and visited. Our technology team actually came up with the name. They told me that they wanted to name it that. It was a city that for a long time had a very strong female leader, and a string actually of female leaders. We've got a very strong diverse leadership team at Writer, and we love the nod to the heritage. My co-founder, Wasim al-Sheikh, is Syrian from Damascus.
So you're Zenobia?
Yeah, I don't know about me, but we are.
You are Zenobia. Wonderful. So you built your own LLM. You did not base your solutions on existing LLMs. Why would you do that? And I would have thought in an industry where there's a race to go to market, a shortcut would have been helpful.
Well, great question. I mean, we were born as a transformer company. When we started building encoder decoders, when we were doing machine translation, very few people were actually commercializing for the enterprise this technology. And so, we can, so why don't we, has always been, our stance really on this. And it's so strategic. I mean, if you rely on other people's models, you are always looking in the rearview mirror when it comes to building the products on top of those models. Versus we're able to see how people struggle with adoption of this technology and build it into our roadmap that the models solve these problems. And yes, we do get emergent properties, capabilities that we didn't plan for. Our latest Palmyra 5, for example, produces images, which has been great, and we've productized on top of that, but that's not what you're optimizing for. But for the most part, right, the kinds of things that we will get to bring to market as products in a year from now, I've got a pretty good idea what they're gonna be based on, what research breakthroughs the team has had. And so that's an immensely powerful leverage and innovation that we can bring to our customers. And it's that innovation that we have become known for. Customers are always telling us this is Fortune 500 companies who have 40 vendors a month knocking on their door. They've heard about things from us before they read about them. They use them from Writer before others bring it to them. And that's really because we control that roadmap. Now, having said that, we have, for really commercial reasons, opened up our orchestration platform to third-party models. So you can orchestrate any tool, any data, any model with our technology. But still, the vast majority of the actual, processing, the tokens happening, on the platform is happening through Palmyra.
So how did you make Palmyra so faster and cheaper than everybody else? And in such a short time as well. What has it been, 3 years?
So yeah, we've been building models for 5 years. Palmyra as a family is about 3.5 years old. For us, it's really come down to three big sources of innovation, I would say. One has been on the data front. We were the first to really pioneer synthetic data approaches. Now, necessity is the mother of all invention. We couldn't afford, the tens of millions, or in many cases, hundreds of millions people were paying scale, really, for labeling services. Now, our latest models do and use, elite kind of expert, think PhD and clinician level labeling. But for the vast majority, of the data that we have created, right, it's been synthetic, and that has dramatically reduced costs. When people put, these big price tags on model, the vast majority of that cost is not the actual GPUs. It's actually assembling the data set, right, to do that. So synthetic data has helped a lot, and now, that is the mainstream approach to so many of these training runs. We've also pioneered how and when to stop training a model, and those kinds of techniques we've published about. And then the third, has really been about just the algorithmic innovation. I mean, models are algorithms, data, and compute. Those are the ingredients, and we've really on three of the three innovated as a necessary condition to build these models.
And what does this independence then allow you to promise and deliver to your customers?
Yeah. So why does an enterprise bet on Writer, right, when they're getting Microsoft for free, Google for free? I mean, they think it's free. It's not really free, but that is how it's positioned. We're able to do reliability and consistency at scale in a way that's very differentiated for these mission critical use cases. And we're able to do that because we've got this full stack approach, right? Think Elon Musk and the Tesla, right? I mean, that is a full stack car, and you can best control the quality when you control every layer, especially when it comes to agentic AI. Agentic AI is about a system of agents that work together, and you're being orchestrated. And if you don't orchestrate quality, you do not get quality. Even with a few percentage points of errors, that really compounds if you've actually got a multi-step flow. And so, we're able to provide this engineering scaffolding on top of the models while really understanding how these models work. And that approach from both the model up and the engineering down really gets us to that reliability and consistency that enterprises need to be able to scale AI. Because if you don't scale AI, you just have personal productivity, right? Which is great. It makes a lot of people's lives better, but you're not saving money, you're not growing the business if people are, doing their jobs 10, 15, even 20% faster. That person still is in that role, still largely doing their job as it existed 5, 10 years ago. It's really only when you can design systems that can be autonomous, at least semi-autonomous, that you start to get the gains of AI, and you can't do that without reliability, consistency, quality. So it gives us a real edge.
So AI, this artificial intelligence, it makes me stop to think, again, here's a philosophical question for you. What is intelligence?
Yeah.
Intelligence, what is it?
When you get any kind of distance from what we do, you really come to understand that LLMs are actually quite dumb, right? They don't have memory. Context has to be provided. They don't learn. Your granddaughter, my daughter learn way easier and way faster, right, than the most powerful models today. And still humanity, we have not yet engineered anything close to the complexity that nature has. But we are upon the dawn of a new age where we are creating intelligence that is going to be able to create intelligence that will get to, right, that level. And I think our ability, even as writer, right, to do so much of what people do at work via AI, even with these models being still as limited as they are, tells us so much about how we have underutilized human potential and human genius, right? The things that we have created that are actually so much simpler than a single human cell that are able to actually take over so many of these tasks. And from an execution perspective, the cost of execution is becoming near free. And our value as humans is going to be in the ability to orchestrate systems of execution versus executing ourselves. And I think that becomes the beginning of human superintelligence, right? I mean, we ask so much, oh, when is AGI coming, et cetera, et cetera. I want to ask, when do we really break through and use way more of our power and our brains at work versus really needing to dumb it down and do these tiny tasks that AI should be doing?
Some will argue that maybe by relying more and more on artificial intelligence, we're actually getting dumber and dumber.
Well, there are definitely some disturbing initial studies, right, that have shown that in colleges, when you do give AI to students who are studying, it definitely hampers, right, their ability to absorb that information. And I know from my own use of AI, I write a lot online, and the posts where I have not used AI at all, I could rewrite from memory. The posts where I've used AI a lot, I really have to think about how I constructed the argument. So there's no question. The answer, I think, really has got to be, how do we intentionally create early rungs of ladders as we learn about, how a profession works, how a business works, where we do a lot less of reliance on AI, right, than we would otherwise, because we're in learning mode.
Yeah, we absolutely are. We're learning as we are doing.
Yes.
And let's just hope that our hope is that we stay on the same path and not deviate from it. But we'll get to that in a minute. So tell me, do we have all the money? Do we have all the energy resources to develop this AI to where presumably where it needs to go, where we want it to go as a race?
I mean, there is the absolutely optimistic and abundant future that we are all trying to get to, right? Elon puts it really well. How do we end up harnessing the energy of the sun, right, to help give us a much more abundant life here on Earth? But I think there are multiple waves of social unrest and rewriting the social contract right before we get there, because the amount of upheaval is just going to be so concentrated compared to the generations that we've really had to get accustomed to the pace of technology change and how it's shaping lives, careers. I mean, I think in 5 to 10 years, when humanoids become a normal part of our domestic life, when the vast majority of what companies do at work today is done by AI, right? That is going to be the biggest amount of change we've had in a single decade, than probably ever. I don't know that it gets worse than that. I do think this is a particularly tough one. But it is going to mean ultimately a flourishing of so much of what makes us human, that today, gets devolved into working across 17 browser tabs, right, at work, and really so narrowly focused on tasks, having such distance between ideation and execution. And it's so much more fun to sit at the intersection of spaces and get to expand laterally what we're capable of as humans. And we say a lot to customers, who ask us about the future of the workforce, that narrow job specs, narrow career ladders are very much a thing of the past already. And I see it on our own team, people who are working with customers able to impact product, people who are product people able to really work in sales, and just, this kind of cross-functional collaboration and this kind of ability to be a generalist expert opens up so much more of our creativity and our minds than before.
So to what degree is the technology an equalizer then? Do we all become equally intelligent, equally capable? And is that good or not so good for us as communities, as society, as a race again?
Yeah. You know, I have a lot of insight into how people use Writer. And I'm constantly amazed at the more basic things people turn to Writer for. And I think especially if you are, you know, gifted when it comes to reading and writing, right? Or, you know, particularly gifted when it comes to the speed at which you can absorb information. I think I take it for granted that someone would want to summarize 2 or 3 pages, right? Or would want an email rewritten. I mean, you are someone for whom, you know, the language just comes very easily, and you wouldn't think twice of needing to use something to summarize something for you, right? But most people get a lot of benefit from doing that. And I really think so much of what we do is bring up everyone to the median of the best performer. Not the best performer, but there is a new leveling that does actually benefit the bottom half of performers much more than the top half. And I think for so many folks, like, that opens up opportunities for them, right, versus close things off. And so over time, especially when we see the spark when someone really is able to use these tools, it's pretty incredible what it does to their performance at work.
There is some resistance, just, I mean, anecdotal that I've seen, not any research or anything, just some resistance from people. Companies seem to want to ride the wave, adopt AI solutions. Employees may still be resistant. So do you find there is a trust gap with employees? What do companies need to do to close that gap?
Yes, there's absolutely AI slop everywhere. And we just did a survey, you know, what scares you the most? We did this for Halloween about AI. And 50-something% out of, you know, 8-9 different choices was AI slop, right? People who actually don't understand why something is bad. Right, and so this is the underbelly of what we just spoke about, that it raises that half. Well, if they didn't know what excellent looks like and they're presenting something as excellent, you know, it's not going to be good for anybody. So, like, putting that aside, I mean, if you're using Writer, you're not getting AI slop. This is a value prop of how we do AI. I think, though, that the ability for the end user to interact with AI in a way where the collaboration, right, is seamless. Because especially with semi-autonomy or more agentic system approaches to solving these problems, AI needs help. And really designing the workflow and the interaction layer to be able to have AI ask the questions that get the input, that get AI on the right path, gets us to quality. And so when you put quality in front of somebody, right, and they still don't want to adopt, right, we call that productivity anchoring. And we do see some of that. And, you know, it is a subtle self-sabotage, but it is so human to become anchored in what has made you valuable, even if it may no longer be necessary. And so the way it shows up is, you know, I still need to check something, or I need to unnecessarily revise something. And those folks need to really be shown, you know, what the alternative is for them in terms of much more opportunity, much better jobs, different roles, different titles. And so people need to see what the alternative is and need to be excited by that vision, or they're not going to be very excited about you rewriting how they do their job.
So you work with a lot of companies, some of the biggest companies that we know. what responsibility does the company have towards employees in the midst of these layoffs that are AI triggered?
Yeah. I think the business needs to take much more responsibility than they have been for both setting the vision of what AI can do for the growth prospects of the company, and then what that's going to mean for employees. I think it shows such a lack of vision when people want to reduce headcount instead of try to come up with new ways to grow, new markets to enter. I mean, we've got customers now in the retail and CPG, consumer packaged goods space, that have taken multi-year kind of innovation pipelines and compressed that with AI. And so if you're really taking a desire to lay people off, right, and kind of masking that with, we're going to use AI, there's sort of like a performative aspect to that I think is easy to see through. It doesn't hide the fact that most leaders don't really understand what's possible nor how they can use AI to grow. I think we've used a very familiar playbook as it comes to IT adoption here, and we've said, okay, CIO, you're responsible for this. But the CIO can't look at a workflow end to end and say, here's how we should remake this workflow. They can't look at an org chart and say, this org chart should be flatter, it helps us go faster. That's got to be driven by the business. It's got to be hands-on by the CEO. And we have really changed the way that we talk about AI and even sell the product, where we don't do the demos anymore. We actually ask the leaders to demo to themselves, right? And literally give them computers that get them hands-on in simulated environments, because most really underappreciate the quality and the value and the speed, things that would have taken them days or weeks as they were coming up in the org, right? Now, minutes. Things that have been sitting in their inboxes or they're waiting for other people to do, that they just get done by themselves, right? And it's when you get hands-on that you really understand what's possible, and stop thinking, I need to cut heads here, but how do I leverage this to grow?
But on the other side, they're thinking, how do I cut expenses? Because it's additional expense to buy the solution, to train employees to use it. So, I mean, they need to balance that aspect as well.
Absolutely. And there's no question, if you've got 400 people processing invoices or matching a manifest against a PO, like there's no reason for that kind of role, right, to exist. But I'm in the front office and in knowledge work, there's so much there that can be harnessed. We've got, from a total cost of ownership perspective, a very attractive model. I also think people are flushing a lot of money down the toilet when it comes to AI. And from a productivity perspective, right, they're giving everybody multiple tools that aren't really helping people produce kind of new ways of working.
So let me raise an objection from my sector, my industry.
Yeah.
AI has already disrupted media and journalism, and these are areas from where AI or the LLMs feed. That's what provides the LLMs with the content. So how do you resolve that paradox?
Yeah. Well, for us, synthetic data is not just a technique that allows us to save a lot of money. It's also, we see it as much more commercially safe, right? We're not taking anyone's IP to produce our own. I think in terms of the role of the media, just think about the number of people you have seen react emotionally to stuff that you can tell is AI generated, and they somehow can't, right? This afflicts so much of our society, and we need the media's help, right? The traditional media, you're the ones that everybody trusts, right? And there is such a role to play in this coming age where it is going to be increasingly hard for the vast majority of people to understand. And, when it comes to helping people understand truth from fiction, it's the trusted brands that I hope folks will turn to.
How do you see creative expression going forward, and what's art going to look like? What's writing books? AI is writing books now.
I think it's an explosion of creativity and hopefully time for more people to be creative. You think about, music from 50, 60, 100 years ago, right? Did producing much easier ways to make music reduce the quality of the music that we created? I think we could argue no. And we could argue instead we got so many new modes, right, of expression, expressed musically. And I think the same for the written word. The whole history of the diffusion of technology has been that things get more personalized, more on demand, there is more choice, there is more variety. And it's because there's no end to the creativity and genius of humans.
But there's been also a couple of cases where copyright or royalty had been infringed, or at least cases towards looking at whether there has been an infringement. Again, how do you manage that? How do you manage to avoid these conflicts?
For us, we don't use copyrighted material. I think, what Hollywood has done to stand up for its rights has been the right thing to do. I think the train has left the station, probably because they didn't coordinate fast enough or forcefully enough. But even for Hollywood, their ability to adapt to these new tools is only going to mean that we're going to get better storytelling that is more personalized. I'll give you a small example, Siva. There's so many beautiful movies that I would actually love to retell, infusing my own family values into them, right? Really helping reflect the kinds of things that I want our kids to grow up with, whether it's cultural or spiritual, etc. We're going to be able to do that soon, right? And really being able to remix, right, in a highly personalized way and create something new. We're going to get so many new art forms as a result of these tools being available to so many more people.
Are these art forms that are being created then in this way, are they original? Are they purely original? Are they new sparks? Or are they adaptations of what had already sparked?
Yeah, I read a funny interview with the writer of The Wire. He was being interviewed by like a Rolling Stone journalist, and he said, "Well, do you use AI in your writer's room?" And he was like, "No, why would I do that?" He said, "Well, okay, you're transitioning from scene A to scene B, and you don't know what to have the character say. Would you just ask AI to give you 10 examples?" And he said, "I'd rather put a gun in my mouth." I mean, so there are definitely going to be artists, right, where it is to their own process, the idea of AI helping them is just, an anathema. I think for the vast majority of people who are non-professionals, it is something that aids in their creativity, is, what they create their own. I would argue that we're constantly remixing from all sorts of sources now, right? And I think we are going to become less insistent on differentiating between, those sources of inspiration that are silicon-based versus carbon-based intelligence.
So, May, tell me, you're of Lebanese origin. Your partner is of Syrian origin. You both live and work in the United States, where you are referred to sometimes as immigrants, as a woman, as in tech and an immigrant. Tell me how that shaped your sense of belonging and how that has shaped your character, your resilience.
Yeah. Well, I think character and resilience for both of us was, way before we got to the Valley. But, being there now, I mean, it's a city of immigrants. It's an industry of immigrants. Even the white people are immigrants. I mean, it is. So, you definitely feel at home. I mean, there's no place in the world that you can become part of a community faster. And I think, both me and Wasim were born in Lebanon and Syria, and I think, it's just so much harder to really see a meritocratic way that you can climb to the top in our countries and in our region. I think the UAE and the Gulf in general, is a more recent exception to that. But I think we both sought to make our professional lives, right?
What do you think the UAE and the region here need to become to be able to offer the support for such opportunities such as yours, such as what you had in the United States?
Yeah, I think they're starting to do that in terms of really being able to offer the capital, the space, the making it easy to fail and start over. I mean, this is just classic Silicon Valley, is no one's ever a failure, and you're only a failure if you literally never try again.
So if you were to remove right there, or to start something here, would that work? What's in the ecosystem that you need to have to be able to succeed?
You know, we now have had 2 companies that serve the enterprise, so surprise, surprise, I'm sure my third will be in the enterprise as well. And, you know, when you sell to the enterprise, you need enterprise buyers who are very innovative. And what's incredible about the American market is not just that it's big, because we're in Europe, we're in Singapore as well. It's that there are people who make software decisions who understand the best way to make big leaps forward in their careers is not to buy Microsoft. It's to go buy the startup that's trying to disrupt, right, the status quo. And it's those innovators that really have a huge hand in creating, right, the next big company, the next big software company. And so you've got innovators like that in finance, in healthcare, in pharma, in retail in the US that are much harder to find in other places. Now, having said that, we're here in Saudi. It's an incredibly dynamic economy. Everyone that we've met from industry or government is incredibly tech forward. They want to leapfrog. And I think when you put that kind of energy with the growth demands of this economy, with the ability of AI to really reinvent, you know, you could really leapfrog, right? What are we trying to do when we sell into an old school Fortune 500 company? We're trying to get them to kind of forget how they've been doing work for 50 years and do something totally new. Well, here, you can scale companies AI native from the get-go in more traditional sectors. So that is very exciting, and I think an opportunity for the region to participate in so much of the growth to come from AI.
So you're a woman founder. I don't need to point that out, but you're a woman founder, and women founders have not had, or still do not have, the easiest of time fundraising. What have you learned that you could share with other women?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, one, fundraising, to paint the vision of what this could be. And it's funny, investors used to get really excited about having $1 billion company. Now everyone wants to be in $1 trillion company. And you know, today, NVIDIA hit a $5 trillion market cap. So we know it's possible. Many companies have done it. And this is really, these are the big ideas, right? And you're never going to get yeses from most people. And really focusing on those investors who can see the sequence of things that you've got to be right about to get that kind of outcome, and who believe in your ambition to stick it out, right? Like, I think in these early stages, there's, and I still think we're only starting, Siba, this is still the start of our journey, that the ability to have the perseverance and really stick through it with a very capable team, keeping that team together, are the things people are, you know, really looking for, even if they're not telling you that's what they're looking for. And, you know, not focusing too much on only the metrics. Yes, have great metrics, but you need that bigger story much more. You
described that you are driven by learning and growth, not by clout or power. Where do you find or keep that humility in an industry that is obsessed with scale and with valuation?
Yeah. So much of, you know, the way me and Wasim are, I think, is shaped by the technology that we build, right? And it's very humbling to get these transformers with these capabilities that are so astounding that you didn't really anticipate for. And I think we're constantly amazed by the exponential laws, right, that are really surprising us. We have to learn at the same pace. You know, the idea of model collapse or, you know, overfitting the data or becoming closed and just decelerating as a human scares me very much. And I love that we're forced to reinvent the business every 6 to 8 months, really, as the technology changes fundamentally. And so, you know, we're at a cadence and a pace that is very scary and very tiring for many people. But for the few people who have chosen Ryder and chosen to be leaders at Ryder, for me and Wasim, it's exhilarating, and you know, I don't think we could be doing anything else.
So as a mother and a founder, tell me, how do you think about legacy? Not just what you build, but also what you model, how you model.
I think it's always been very important to me. I know this sounds, you know, maybe lame, but to live up to one's potential. You have so many God-given gifts. You've got so many advantages for people from people who have sacrificed for you, whether it's your parents or your family. Yes, you want to make them proud, and maybe that's still a big part of what motivates me is, you know, making people who invested in me really, really proud.
So, top leadership qualities are creative thinking, I would say courage, vision, of course. How do you make people walk into the fire with you as a leader?
Yeah, I think the clarity of vision is really important. The future belongs to those who can see it. And you know, the bigger the company gets, you know, I find myself having to work harder at, you know, articulating the vision and how it's showing up in strategy, or else it is too easy to see it as tactics or tactical and not laddering up to, you know, a bigger idea or a bigger plan. And that's actually been a hard transition for me to make as a leader, as you know, going from a small group of people where you and your co-founder are finishing each other's sentences and not too many words need to be exchanged to be able to paint a mutual model, right, of where the world goes, to, you know, a much bigger company where proportionately, you know, the average tenure of the average person only gets lower and lower and lower, right, as new people come into the company. And so we're having to do much more communication. And, you know, there's this old adage that, you know, it's only started to stick in people's minds when you are so bored of saying it, you know, and that especially as someone who's constantly learning, you know, I'm not good at being bored, and that's the hardest part of leadership right now for me.
You're still going at it. You were building this before it all became a hype or a trend. How did you shift from building in obscurity to right in the middle of the hype of ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and all these?
Yeah, I think it was a privilege to get to spend a couple of years building before it was crazy. And I remember, you know, very actively going into sales conversations with more traditional industries and, you know, really trying hard not to say the words AI as we described what we could do. And then that really shifted. People wanted AI, right, after the ChatGPT moment. And so that was a very exciting thing for us. Now, of course, along with that exposure came a ton of competition. And I think what I'm constantly reminding myself and the team is the competition is what's normal. The era of obscurity is what was not normal. And, you know, competition means big TAM, big outcomes, and big customers.
Finally, just will you be able to continue to scale, and how much can you scale? Your solutions are bespoke to your clients. You're on how many employees now?
For 500.
500, aiming for 800. How much can you continue to scale?
Yeah. Well, you know, we're trying to go all the way. So I hope we'll be able to scale for years to come. But, you know, we're having to solve scaling challenges that come faster and more furious than in other SaaS or software cycles because of the pace of change of the technology, the amount of intense focus on this. I mean, this is, existential moments for traditional software providers. So it is not going to be easy, but we are the only pure play company in this space. We're the only full stack AI company that's not actually trying to do something else, coding or personal productivity or compute or databases. And that means that we get to really take this AI native platform, an AI native team, an AI native methodology, and get to walk enterprises through a AI first future in a way that's very differentiated. So inshallah, we'll be able to do that for decades to come.
Inshallah, we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Siba.
And all the energy.
Thank you.
And all the creativity.
Thank you.